The day the Philippines said enough and the world felt it. Have you ever noticed how some world leaders speak about smaller nations as if they're nothing more than background noise on the global stage? How they think they can toss around insults, make belittling remarks, or downplay the efforts of others, and just walk away untouched, unchallenged? Well, in 2025, that changed because the Philippines, long underestimated, often overlooked, stood up, and the world was forced to listen. This is not just a political story. It's a story about dignity, about pride, about a people who've endured much, and finally said, enough. Chapter 1. The Voice That Was Supposed to Stay Small. There were 5 world leaders, each with their own power, their own arrogance, who made the mistake of underestimating the Filipino spirit. One of them, a French president, casually dismissed the Philippines during a global summit, saying, "They're just a small voice in Southeast Asia." Small voice? Tell that to the millions of Filipinos working around the globe, holding up entire industries. Tell that to the generations who endured colonization, war, dictatorship, and still kept rising. The French president may have expected silence. Instead, what followed was a storm of backlash. Filipino diplomats withdrew cooperation on several European trade talks. Social media lit up. Filipino voices, loud and proud, made headlines across the world. The message was clear. We may be small in size, but our voice will be heard. Chapter 2. The Japanese misstep that broke a bond. But the most painful blow didn't come from an enemy. It came from a friend. For decades, the Philippines and Japan had worked together. They had moved beyond the pain of World War II and built something stronger, a partnership. They trained together. They shared intelligence. They helped each other grow. That's what made what happened in early 2025 so devastating. At the Tokyo Defense Conference, a stage that was meant to showcase unity, Filipino officials proudly presented their new anti-ship missile system. It was a turning point, a symbol that the Philippines wasn't just watching from the sidelines anymore. They were ready to defend their waters, ready to stand their ground. But then came the words that shattered everything. Japan's defense minister, Kimura, leaned into the microphone and said, "The Philippines may have patrol boats, but they don't yet have a navy. They should focus on dialogue instead of deterrence." It felt like a gut punch, a slap in the face from an ally. That one statement, uttered so casually, ignited something deep within the Filipino people. Chapter 3. The Nation Responds. It wasn't just government officials who were offended. It was veterans, mothers, students, fishermen, people who had always known what it meant to fight for freedom, many of whom had family who bled for it. Filipino war veterans, especially those who still remembered the Japanese occupation during World War II, were furious. They had forgiven, but they had not forgotten. They had welcomed Japan back as a friend, and now that friend had made them feel small once again. The backlash was immediate. Thousands took to the streets and to social media. Hashtags like "Here We Have a Navy" and "Respect Philippine Sovereignty" trended worldwide. Photos and videos of the Philippine Navy's modernization efforts flooded timelines. New ships, missile systems, joint drills. It wasn't about bragging. It was about reclaiming dignity. Chapter 4. Consequences. Within days, Japan felt the heat. The Philippine Senate called for a reevaluation of all military cooperation agreements. A major joint naval exercise scheduled for April was suspended. Even Filipino citizens working in Japan began organizing peaceful rallies. Not to provoke, but to remind the world, respect goes both ways. And eventually Japan responded, not just with a statement, but with action. Defense Minister Kimura was forced to apologize publicly. Japan's Prime Minister sent a delegation to Manila to reaffirm the alliance and express regret for the minister's remarks. But the damage was already done. The bond wasn't broken, but it was bruised. And the Philippines had made something very clear. They were no longer going to accept disrespect, no matter who it came from. Chapter 5. A New Era of Pride. This wasn't just about one comment or one country. It was about centuries of being underestimated, of being colonized, ignored, ridiculed, and told to stay in your place. But 2025 marked a turning point. From diplomats to delivery drivers, from soldiers to students, Filipinos around the world stood taller. They knew the truth, that their country may be an archipelago, but its heart is mighty, that their people may be scattered across the globe, but they are united in spirit, and that anyone who dares to belittle the Philippines must now deal with something far more powerful than weapons or words. A nation that has finally found its voice and refuses to let it be silenced ever again. This is not just about foreign policy. This is about honor. This is about respect. This is about never underestimating the quiet strength of a people who've survived everything and still choose to rise. The Philippines isn't a small voice. It's a roar that the world can no longer ignore. They thought we'd stay silent. How the Philippines rose against global disrespect in 2025. Part 2. Chapter 2. Japan's miscalculation and the resignation heard around Asia. What started as a careless insult from an ally quickly escalated into a diplomatic crisis that shook two nations and shifted the balance of respect in Southeast Asia. After the Tokyo Defense Conference, President Marcos Jr. didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out, but his words struck like thunder. Every nation has the right to defend itself. Courage isn't measured by warships, but by the will to protect sovereignty. It was a calm rebuke, but its message roared louder than any army. Never again will the Philippines accept being treated as a lesser power. The remark from Japan's Defense Minister Kimura, suggesting the Philippines didn't really have a navy and should focus on talking instead of preparing, wasn't just disrespectful. It revealed something deeper. Japanese analysts began to ask, was this just one man's mistake, or the symptom of an old mindset? Did Japan still see Southeast Asia as a junior partner, a region to manage, not to respect? In Japan, this question set off a political storm. Newspapers splashed headlines. TV panels debated nonstop. Some tried to downplay Kimura's words, but the damage was done. Within days, the Japanese Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, was forced to call an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed, silence hung in the air, and then the apology came. Minister Kimura's remarks do not reflect the position of the Japanese government. We deeply regret the pain caused, but apologies, once the damage is done, only go so far. The real shock came next. Kimura resigned. For Japan, a nation known for political restraint, this was no small act. It was humiliation. It was surrender. But for the Philippines, it was vindication. The nation had stood its ground and won. It wasn't about ego. It was about dignity. And that day, the Philippines proved something powerful. Respect is not given by the strong to the weak. It is demanded by the worthy from the arrogant. Chapter 3. Australia's Banana Republic Blunder. It was supposed to be a routine budget debate in Australia's parliament. Just another day of politics. But on that day in June 2025, one careless remark would nearly end a political career and light a fire across the Pacific. Senator Troy Wallace, a hard-right voice known for his bluntness, stood up and said the words that would follow him forever. Why throw millions of dollars into a banana republic like the Philippines? It'll just be wasted anyway. The chamber froze, not out of agreement, but out of shock. Banana Republic, two words soaked in history, racism, and colonial arrogance, used to mock poor nations, to strip them of identity and dignity. It wasn't just a bad choice of words. It was a window into the kind of thinking that sees developing nations as jokes, as disposable. The Philippines didn't stay quiet. Within hours, Manila had summoned the Australian ambassador. The Department of Foreign Affairs issued a blistering statement, and online, Filipinos around the world rose like a tidal wave. Not a Banana Republic trended worldwide. Filipinos shared their stories, their sacrifices, their pride. Healthcare workers reminded the world that over 40,000 Filipinos serve in medical systems across Australia and the UK. They were the ones holding the line during COVID, the ones comforting strangers in hospital beds. And now, they were being mocked by the very people they served. It wasn't just wrong. It was infuriating. Soon, even Australians were speaking out. Human rights groups, labor leaders, even members of Wallace's own party began to distance themselves. Within 48 hours, Wallace lost his seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. Donors vanished. His re-election bid collapsed. And what about the Philippines? They didn't scream. They didn't beg. They stood tall. We are not a charity case. We are a partner. Treat us like one. That was the message, and it echoed far beyond the shores of Australia. Chapter 4. The UK and the low-skilled controversy. It happened during yet another heated debate, this time in the House of Commons in London. UK Prime Minister Elizabeth Harrow, while discussing post-Brexit immigration policies, said the quiet part out loud. We need tighter controls on the influx of low-skilled workers from countries like the Philippines. The word low-skilled hit like a slap in the face. To many, it was just another political soundbite. But to millions of Filipinos, especially those in the UK, it was a dagger. Because it wasn't just inaccurate, it was dehumanizing. Filipinos had kept the NHS alive. They had cleaned hospital floors, run operating rooms, managed logistics, saved lives. During the pandemic, while others stayed home, they stayed working, risking their lives. To call them low-skilled? That wasn't just wrong. It was outrageous. The response was swift. Protests broke out in London, Birmingham, and Manchester. Filipino nurses, doctors, engineers, and allies from every background flooded the streets with signs, not low-skilled, highly essential. We kept you breathing. We deserve more than thanks. Online, the hashtag number sign, not low-skilled, exploded. And for the first time in her term, Prime Minister Harrow felt the ground shake beneath her. Public opinion turned. Polls crashed. Even her own cabinet grew restless. Soon she was on live TV, visibly shaken, offering a public apology. I failed to recognize the immense value of the Filipino community. I deeply regret my words. But the damage lingered. She never fully recovered. Her image, once polished, was now cracked. And in Filipino communities around the world, the message was clear. We know our worth. We don't need you to validate it. Final chapter. The world learns a lesson. 5 leaders, 5 countries, 5 miscalculations. They thought they could mock, belittle, dismiss the Philippines, and walk away untouched. But 2025 wasn't like the past. This time the Philippines stood up, not with violence, not with rage, but with dignity, unity, and a voice too powerful to ignore. A president who spoke calmly, but struck hard. A people who rallied with pride. A nation that said, we are not small. We are not weak. We are not silent. From Tokyo to Canberra, from London to Paris, world leaders now knew, disrespecting the Philippines comes with a price, and that price is your reputation. Epilogue, The Awakening. The world saw the Philippines not as a passive observer, but as a rising force, a nation born from struggle, refined by storms, and now awakened. The question now isn't whether the Philippines belongs at the table. The question is, who's still underestimating them, and for how much longer? So we ask you, which of these leaders made the gravest mistake? Is this the turning point where the world finally respects the Filipino voice? Leave a comment below. Share this with someone who believes in the power of national pride. And remember, never underestimate a nation that knows its worth.